Yo, what's up everybody, it's Tuna. In today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about Ultimatum, because in 3.23 Affliction League, Ultimatum is coming back and it's going to be here to stay. Essentially, I just wanted to talk a little bit about everything that we know so far. There's still a lot of information that is yet to be seen. However, judging by what we see on the patch notes, as well as all of the other information that we know from the league itself, I've compiled information here that you guys can digest before you go into the league, knowing what you're getting yourself into, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are hearing, it's crazy, and you want to spec into it and try it, but just some things to consider here that we'll go through. So first of all, what is Ultimatum? It is a semi-hardcore mechanic, meaning that if you die or you leave the area, you basically lose all of your rewards, you get nothing for it. And since the monsters don't drop any more loot, it's basically just gonna be, your time is wasted, right? But, that's what makes it fun as well. It's a risk versus reward mechanic, and it's round based. So essentially, there's always an option for you to opt out and get all of the rewards that you have gotten up until that point. So that's pretty cool. If you don't see like a really good reward on the next round, but you already have some pretty good stuff, you could always just say, take rewards, get me out of here. So yeah. It has ramping difficulty. We don't know exactly what the scaling will be like, but what that means is that, you'll start and it'll be really easy. And once you get to wave 9, 10, upward, up until 13, it's going to be pretty damn difficult. The monsters will deal more damage. There'll be stacking modifiers from things that you have chosen on your way to wave 13. And in general, it's just going to be kind of difficult. So yeah. But one of the cool things that I'm looking forward to see, it's like a weird small thing, but there's pause technology. Essentially, once you see the screen here where you get to choose your reward, your entire map is going to be paused. So that means that you can actually, do Ultimatum, and if you need to do something, you could just like leave your computer, come back, and you'll just be here. And I wish they implemented this mechanic onto other mechanics as well. But what is Ultimatum basically? It's get rich or die trying, basically, is what it is, because you'll be getting a lot of crazy rewards. However, you'll also be losing some to your greed. So yeah, don't be too greedy. So now I'd like to go over some of the differences between the old Ultimatum and the new Ultimatum from what we know from the patch notes themselves. So yeah, new Ultimatum gets Scarabs as well as Sextants. We have 10 rounds guaranteed, whereas it used to be just a random number of rounds. The boss is back to being RNG. So as of right now, there are fragments that you can combine, and that pretty much guarantees you access to the boss, and you can just target farm him and whatever. But now he's back to being RNG. There's also Atlas passive skills that you can spec into to sort of tailor your experience with the mechanic itself, as well as boost the rewards and increase the downsides. There are negative mods that scale up to T4. Monsters no longer drop loot. This is a big one, because essentially what this means is that the only rewards that you'll be getting are from, the reward window themselves. Also, since Metamorph no longer exists, catalysts and all of those kind of rewards have now moved over to Ultimatum. All the uniques from Metamorph are now global. However, catalysts are going to be specific to Ultimatum. And yeah, Ultimatum fragments, instead of granting you access to the boss, they combine into a unique jewel. We don't yet know what that unique jewel is, but jewels are pretty damn powerful in Path of Exile since the rework. I think that unique jewel is going to be pretty strong. And map quantity scales catalyst rewards. So if there's a stack of 2 catalyst rewards and you have 100% increased map quantity, maybe that's going to double. I don't know exactly what the formula is for that, but essentially what that means is that, yeah, you'll be getting more catalysts depending on how much map quantity you have. Inscribed Ultimatums is a specific map item drop that you can get from doing the ultimatums themselves. It is no longer a random drop. In Ultimatum League, we used to get it just from random monsters. It is now rewarded specifically by the Ultimatum mechanic. And what you can see here on the right is basically just like a map. You can access it. It's basically like input and output, right? So it rewards you depending on what you put in. So there's opportunity for you to double your currency. So there will be Ultimatum rewards that say, sacrifice 2 divines to gain 4 divines, right? But if you were to fail it, of course, you get 0. You have the potential to double your divines at a cost. People are going to be selling these at like lesser value than what you can get out of it, as you'll be expected to be able to complete them on builds that are made for farming them, which is pretty cool, because that means that you'll be able to create builds that are specific to farming Inscribed Ultimatums, as I have and some other people have done in the past, and that's pretty good content as well, because it's essentially you're putting up a lot on the line, a lot of currency to get some other stuff out. There's also going to be ways to upgrade uniques. So there's going to be inscribed ultimatums which you drop that are going to give you the chance to, maybe you put in a Worm's Mold and what you get out of it is a Headhunter or potentially a Mage Blood or something like that. And also double divination cards. So you maybe put in 1 apothecary and you get 2 apothecaries out of it, right? Essentially, that's what inscribed ultimatums are, and they're very cool because it'll give you a new way to play Path of Exile, essentially. You'll be able to create groups of people, and there'll be people specialized in actually farming these. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ultimatum encounter types. So there are different types of ultimatums. It's going to be one of 4 different types. So this is specifically the in-map ultimatums. So there are the options to defeat waves of enemies. That means that you'll basically have a progress bar, and as you kill enemies, that progress bar fills. This set tends to be the fastest one to progress. The second one is to survive. So you basically have a timer, and you need to survive for that duration. Obviously you need to kill monsters as you probably get overwhelmed. The monsters keep spawning and stuff like that. But this is more geared towards like if you have maybe a build that is more tanky but doesn't deal an insane amount of damage, you'll probably do better in this one. Then in the stone circles is quite annoying as there's going to be a bunch of random targeted attacks as well as ground effects and that kind of stuff. But basically there are these circles and you step inside them and it charges off the bar. And so yeah, you can basically like walk in and out of them and the bar still gets charged. It doesn't like reset back to 0. So yeah, you'll be basically slowly progressing towards completing the ultimatum just by stepping in and out and still dodging out of things. But this by far is the most annoying one because yeah, staying stationary in Path of Exile generally means death, right? You don't want that. And the next one is protect the altar. So this thing spawns in the middle and monsters will try to kill it. And basically you have to kill them so they don't kill it. That is basically it. Or you could have like weird things like potentially spawning, taunt totems or anything like that. Yeah, those are the ultimatum types in maps. And what you will have is you'll get 1 reward each wave. So each wave you'll get this window popping up and you'll choose between, A or B. Yeah, you get to keep 1 of 2 of them. Sometimes you get like a no-brainer, but other times you get, 2 valuable rewards that you might have to choose between. So yeah, and the rewards ramp up in later waves. So you'll start out at some like measly currency and you'll end up at here, as you can see, wave 13, the guy's getting 3 divine orbs, or it could be even crazier stuff, right? It could be mage bloods, it could be mirrors, it could be basically anything. And of course, rarity is dependent, like the developers are going to have all that stuff coded and sorted out. You're going to see some crazy stuff, people getting some pretty interesting loot. And yeah, all the loot drops at the end in 1 loot explosion. So it's not like you can cash out at certain points and continue. So you'll have to either, stop and take everything or continue and risk everything. You die or walk out of the circle, again, you lose. So make sure that you do not walk out of the enclosed or the area that ultimatum tells you to stay in. And in general, ultimatums are going to be a great source of, currency, scarabs, and catalysts. You'll be getting a ton of that bubblegum currency and things to trade around to other players. So it's just going to be a nice way to accumulate a bunch of stuff and in general, a really good currency maker, I think, as long as you have a build that can handle it. I think additionally, one of the coolest things about Ultimatum is that we are getting well-rolled rares. In Ultimatum League, this was the first time they introduced this concept, and unfortunately, they haven't actually shown us this since, aside for Heist, actually. At the end of Grand Heist, sometimes you see this as well. But what that means is that, in lower waves, you will be getting a lot of rare rewards, and these rares will actually be pretty decent, you'll notice. That's because they implemented this weird, like, well-rolled type of system, where if you get a helmet, it's going to have life and resistances. Boost will have, movement speed and that kind of stuff. It's very useful for early gearing and progression. When you get into maps, if you see an ultimatum, always look at it, don't skip it, even in early progression, as you never know if it might have like a really decent rare, even on the first wave, right? So even just looking at the first wave and being like, oh, yo, that's pretty good, taking that and then moving on, that's going to be pretty decent for your early progression. So yeah, make sure you check that out. And yeah, back to mirrored inscribed ultimatums. This is where the ultimate risk versus reward comes in, because yeah, essentially these are going to be substantially cheaper than mirrors, and they create a copy of the original item just as a mirror would. However, if you fail or disconnect or anything happens, it deletes both. Both are gone. Poof. It's like basically just rip bozo. You'll never get your item back no matter what. And you can see that these have some pretty crazy mods. here in this one here that I found still on trade. So yeah, you really need to be careful by which Inscribed Ultimatum you buy or run, because yeah, you'll need to familiarize yourself with what mods your build is good at and what mods to avoid. Some mods are hated by everybody, and those mods will be sold at a much cheaper price. Again, if you manage to create a build or are good at running these, you can make insane amount of currency doing the very high risk ones. But if you do end up actually failing one, it could set you back pretty much all of the profit you've made up until that point. So you know how it is. Staff are gone, and yeah, the rest is history. But yeah, new rewards. This is pretty cool. There are some that we don't know quite yet, but in general, Tainted Catalysts is one of the cooler ones, which allows you to get a random quality onto a piece of jewelry. So if you have a jewelry that is corrupted, you can now actually gamble, you know, a 1 in 20 chance to get between 1 to 20% quality of a random type of catalyst. So it's a 1 in 10 chance to get the type of catalyst you want, and a 1 in 20 chance to get up to 20%. So you'll probably just be like settling, you know, if you hit like 17% of the catalyst that you want, you'll settle for that. You'll never try to go for 20% unless you're like super rich or super stupid. One of the two, you decide. But yeah, essentially these are probably going to be pretty plentiful, as I suspect a lot of people are going to be running Ultimatum. And one other unique that they showed off that is pretty cool is the Itchland's Temptation Gold Ring. There's going to be very high variance on these rolls probably. And there is so many rolls of, you know, not super high, like the numbers of them are pretty low, because you can have up to maximum of 200% quality, meaning that these modifiers will be multiplied by, you know, will be tripled once you apply a Tainted Catalyst at 200% of its quality. So imagine like this rolls up to 20%. If you were to catalyze this and it hits critical strike at 200%, you basically got 60% critical strike multiplier, which is pretty damn crazy. You can't get nothing nearly as crazy as that on a ring. Probably the highest DPS ring you can get in the game outside of, you know, like charge implicits or that kind of stuff. So pretty cool ring overall, but it's going to be pretty impossible to get one with the right quality at 200% or close to. Yeah, I think it's a cool, unique, very cool design, and would be cool to see more uniques like this in the future now that they have actually created the Tainted Catalyst, right? Yeah, it's pretty damn cool. Props to GGG. Next, the old uniques are coming back, and I assume these are going to have the same drop rate as they did in the past, but we never know. So that the Glimpse of Chaos, the Relic of the Pact, you know, Temptation Steps, Yamax Accord, Mahuk Subtle, and the Hate Forge. Hate Forge, keep in mind that the builds that usually had excelled with it are kind of bad now, so it's not as exciting as it used to be. However, seeing Mahuk Subtle, Relic of the Pact, and Glimpse of Chaos, and potentially being less rare because of the fact that so many people will be running Ultimatum and the boss is very exciting, because these items are some of the coolest uniques that they've ever made. We'll talk about them here a little bit. So Relic of the Pact, essentially what it does is it reserves your life, and you can unreserve it and just basically blow up around your character. So it's like you have to really build around it. It's not just like a generic weapon. It is literally your build, right? Yeah, having it at 20% drop rate and more people killing the Trial Master, it's going to be pretty interesting. And especially with the Warlock power, Crimson power, you'll be able to stack an insane amount of life. You know, I've seen Captain Lance say that it's possible to get up to 30 to 40,000 life with this. And what this means is that since the damage of this weapon scales with the amount of life that you're able to reserve and unreserve, you're going to deal a ton of damage, right? So it's pretty exciting to see the amount of like one-shot stuff that you'll be able to do with this wand. Next is the Glimpse of Chaos, and I love this item. Every league I try to make sort of a live search, and it's my, you know, Magic Find helmet, and I found some pretty crazy helmets so far. As you can see in the top right, that's one of the helmets that I found. But let's explain a little bit about what this is. The Glimpse of Chaos is going to be an item that has specific modifiers on it, and it can be corrupted. Just like the Cirrus Gloves, as you corrupt it, it can modify the item, right? It can remove or it can add affixes onto the item. So as you can see, it has increased maximum life and reduced fire resistance, increased maximum mana and reduced cold resistance, and increased global energy shield, reduced lightning resistance. Imagine you are just playing a life build and you don't care about mana and lightning resistance. If you corrupt it, there's a chance that you will remove these two. So you remove the downside of those two modifiers and you're left with 40% increased maximum life and reduce fire resistance. So it's much easier to mitigate the downside and you get a ton from the upside, right? So that's pretty damn cool. And yeah, chaos resistance is 0. This can also be corrupted off, meaning that if you are playing a build that is chaos positive, right, you definitely don't want to have that. And most builds these days, they will get up to like 50%, around 50% plus, 75% is ideal. But yeah, corrupting that off is pretty ideal. Keep in mind, you can corrupt off cannot be modified while corrupted, meaning that if that happens, it's bricked, right? And then on top of that, corrupting it can also re-roll the implicit, and that's what you see here. This list of implicits are things that you can roll, and there's some pretty crazy ones and also some pretty mid ones, but the crazy ones are, for example, Skills Fire an additional projectile, or Air of Effect 25% is pretty damn good. Increased effect of non-curse auras as well. This one is very expensive, and also increased quantity of items found is very, very expensive too. As well as socketed skill gems get 80% cost reservation multiplier. So yeah, I mean, the helmet itself with these implicits is not that good. They are pretty expensive because of the fact that people like to gamble on these. And they like to gamble on these because either if it goes to a rare item or a unique item, which is another outcome that it can have with the corruption, it can become some pretty crazy stuff. So you can see here a Devoto with 7% increased quantity. People are selling for like 150 divines, right? This one didn't sell, so maybe it wasn't worth 150, but it has potential for it, right? And another outcome, of course, is like, as you can see here on the top right, it becomes rare, and you can get, obviously it's like throwing a Chaos Orb at an item when it becomes rare. So you can get some pretty insane stats. This is the helmet that I bought this league on my Magic Finder, and it ended up rolling with 14, T1 suppression, T2 life, as well as T1 rarity, with 7% increased quantity of items found implicit. And I bought this for 100 divines. I think it's worth a lot more, but it was really cool to find, and I just got it helmet enchanted. And yeah, another bonus is that, of course, you don't have to actually get your helmets enchanted anymore, which is huge, because yeah, you don't have to give your helmet anymore to some guy to run in lab or run it yourself. So it opens up the possibilities for people to just like, they drop an item, they corrupt it, it's insane, and you use it straight away, instead of being like, oh, I'll be able to use it in like 1 week when this guy comes back to me, or he comes back saying I didn't get it or whatever, right? And then pay him X amount of money. That's really exciting. Less friction to play the game. I think it's just good in general. So that's the Glimpses of Chaos. I could talk more about it, but yeah, very exciting. Got the reworked Yaumax. Not super excited about this one because it's very situational and also kind of garbage. But essentially, they've changed the entire item to now it causes Val non-aura skills to have 80% less soul cost. So when you have like your souls that you need to spend for your Val skill, it uses 80% of those. Less of those. And yeah, you can stack these modifiers. You can have 2 Yaumax, but it's multiplicative, so it's not going to be 160% less. You need to have reduced for it to actually get to 0 soul cost. So yeah, it's going to be, I think, 97%, I think. So it's still good, but you'll still have some soul cost there. But the downside of it, of course, is that every time you use the skill, that soul cost is increased by 100%. It means that you want to be using this on Val skills that you use only once every 8 seconds or more than 8 seconds. So one that comes to mind is potentially doing Val Earthquake, right? So that could be kind of cool because Val Earthquake has a secondary duration of 12 seconds, so it outlasts the downside. However, you'll be using a pretty terrible weapon. It's going to be kind of weird for you to scale the damage. You'll probably just have to play like a stacker, like a strength stacker, and getting your boots from replica Alberons, or dual wielding, and then just being okay with like one weapon being terrible. Obviously, there's downsides to this, and very hard to fit into a build, but maybe someone comes up with something crazy. You never know. That's the beauty about Path of Exile. A 1 elk unique can become priceless if one guy just discovers a broken interaction. That is the genius behind a lot of these items, honestly. And yeah, now that we rambled on a little bit about uniques, I wanted to talk about the ultimatum modifiers. And these are just some of the modifiers that I deem to be the worst. There are more modifiers, but just to give you an idea of what the really bad ones are and what you want to avoid, there's going to be more modifiers. They said they're adding a bunch more. Yeah, keep that in mind as well. So you got Choking Miasma. This is really bad if you have a build that doesn't have capped chaos resistance, as there will be chaos clouds all around your ultimatum, and since it's an enclosed area, sometimes you have to run through it. If you don't have high chaos resistance, this is going to deal an insane amount of damage to you. That's pretty one to avoid. Escalating damage taken. This is universally bad for every build. It's going to ramp up, and as the encounter goes on, you get to 50%, and then it lasts at 50% for the remainder of the encounter. So you'll be taking 50% increased damage. It's not good. That's like max shock. So yeah, you'll be much more likely to die if a monster hits you or anything happens. And you have escalating monster speed. Much like the escalating damage taken, horrible. It's going to ramp up to 50% increased speed. That also increases the speed of the traps and things like that. I feel like, for example, the flaming skulls that we'll go over after are actually coded to be untargetable and undamageable minions or enemies, right? So they'll actually be getting additional speed as well. It can be really bad because they deal a lot of damage. So yeah, one to avoid too for sure. Less cooldown recovery. This could be bad for certain builds, not all builds, but for example, if you're a cast when damage taken build, cast on crit build, or a build that relies on a cooldown, like Frostblink or something like that. This is especially bad because, yeah, 5 times longer to recharge. That means that you deal 5 times less damage. And lightning damage from mana cost also doesn't affect all builds the same. If you do, you know, if you're a spellcaster and your mana cost is 100, that is going to be multiplied by 1000%. So that is a lot of damage that you take, but of course you can mitigate that through damage reduction as well as resistances. You'll be taking a substantial less amount of damage, but still pretty bad, and you can kill yourself, especially if you have a high cast rate, right? So yeah, one to keep in mind for sure, depending on your build. Now, on to the worst ones by far. Limited flask. Basically, using a flask removes any existing flask. That means that you can only have one active flask at a time. Especially bad because a lot of builds actually rely on flasks, like Pathfinders and things like that will be capping their resistance with flask. Especially now that we all use instilling orbs, it's really bad because our instilling orbs are going to automatically use flasks. And imagine you're a Pathfinder that caps your resistance with a flask. You won't be able to choose that specific flask unless you remove your instilling orbs or whatever. So in that situation, you're kind of screwed. Occasional impotence, it makes you not deal any damage for 2 seconds every 8 seconds. So yeah, that's 20% of the time you won't deal damage, which can be especially bad if you're in later waves and you get overwhelmed in those 2 seconds or you're not expecting it. You know, in PoE, damage is actually one of your greatest defenses. It can be pretty bad. Raging Dead is the skulls that I was talking about earlier. So there's going to be a bunch of skulls there, and their speed is actually increased by your map modifiers and stuff like that. So yeah, they can deal a lot of damage and kill you essentially, especially if you have, you know, minus max or something like that. And Treacherous Auras is probably the least worst one of the lot, but it makes it so that your auras affect allies as well as enemies. So if you have a juiced up haste, monsters are also going to be juiced up by it. It's not so bad if you're running with an Aurabot, because people are going to say, oh, like, oh, Aurabots are screwed, right? No, not really, because if you're running with an Aurabot, you're pretty much immortal anyways, and it won't matter. There are situations where things can get pretty intense. Those are all the bad mods, but these are the worst mods, which is Ruin, because Ruin unconditionally makes you lose Ultimatum. So Ruin is a type of debuff that is not harmful. You get that stacks up to 7, and once you have 7 Ruin, Ultimatum is over, GG. So Ruin will make it so that 2 monsters basically are gain this buff, and when they hit you, you get 1 stack of Ruin. And then you have Restless Ground, which creates patches on the floor that essentially resurrects monsters that inflict Ruin. So again, if you get 7 stacks, you're dead. In Stalking Ruin, there's going to be these phantasms walking around that once you get to level 3 and level 4, essentially, you know, they're going to be faster, and they throw projectiles at you, and they have like this little splash damage animation on the floor. If you get hit by that, yeah, again, gonna ruin your time. So definitely something that you want to stay away from, especially if you're running Inscribed Ultimatums and Mirroring Staffs. That is not a good one. These are by far the worst. So now that we talked a little bit about all of the bad modifiers that you want to stay away from, talk a bit about the Atlas passives, because there's some really interesting ones here. They've designed some pretty damn cool stuff. So there's the Uber Ultimatum Keystone, Ruling Gauntlet, which basically makes it so you cannot choose your ultimatum modifiers. So that's the downsides that we just showed. You cannot show them. You might need to have a build that can adapt to all of these. There isn't really any build that can do all of them, but maybe somebody comes up with something, right? The upside of it is that you get 3 additional rounds. And as we talked about earlier, the later rounds will get better and better rewards, and that will be sort of at 13 you might get all the crazy stuff like Mage Blood, divination cards of like high rarity and all that kinds of stuff. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you can get beyond 10, on top of the fact that you'll be able to get scarabs and then scale beyond that. But that's a little bit about on that later. And the downside, you know, is that you cannot spawn the boss. So if you want to be farming the boss, of course you don't want to do this, but depending on how much the spawn rate of the boss is, I think this one is definitely going to be worth, absolutely going to be worth if you want to farming Ultimatum. Almost going to be a no-brainer for sure, which is cool to see, but also, you know, a lot of these keystones should be more of a choice in my opinion, and the upside is really outweighs the cons. So like on softcore, you are going to be clicking this for sure. I could see it being maybe a choice on hardcore, as long as the rewards are compelling enough in the earlier waves, right? Next, we'll talk about the the notables that buff Inscribed Ultimatum drop chance. So Inscribed Ultimatums are divided in three. There's going to be divination, unique, as well as currency ones. And depending on which node you take here, it's going to increase the chance of that one dropping. However, they are all good, right? We talked a little bit about it earlier, but there are currency ones that can duplicate divination divine currencies, as well as potentially give you also mirrors, stuff like that. Not mirrors, but the potential to mirror items. And there's divination ones that can duplicate, good divination cards like the Doctor as well as the Apothecary, right? And of course, there are also unique ones which can upgrade bad uniques into good uniques. So specking into these is just going to be actually just up to you. It's a choice. However, for me, a min-maxer or whatever, I prefer not to put my points into something like this, as I think all of them are good. So I wouldn't really mind getting any of these. But for example, if you're playing SSF and you want to target farm uniques more, and these Inscribed Ultimatums are actually really common, then going for the unique one is going to be pretty advantageous for you. So yeah, the choice is there, and it's nice that the developers actually create choice. There's also, I find like the player base a lot of the time looks at things in a narrow way, that they say like, oh, why even make it if it's garbage? Well, the thing is, you can always adapt your playstyle to your own preferences. And there is also always going to be people playing the game in a different way than you. And I think there's also room for there to be like mechanics that are good for solo self-found as well as Trade League, right? A lot of the time they design around Trade League, but in some situations it doesn't hurt to have extra passives here that you do not have to take. That's really nice to have, I think, in general. Now, Ultimatum boss spawn. Depending on how much spawn rate the boss actually has, these ones are also conditional. But, if the uniques end up being really expensive, and the spawn rate is kind of reasonable, that can be pretty good. But the consensus on it was that in Ultimatum it was between 1 to 3% spawn chance. Now, this might have been my chat being extremely pessimistic. There is a 70% increased chance to spawn the boss. So imagine if you have a 1% chance, then you'll have a 1.7% chance to spawn the boss. But I suspect it's probably going to be around 5%. Buffing that by 70% is going to be pretty good. Yeah, hopefully it's higher. I really do hope to see it farmable for people that want to do that. But keep in mind that the boss can be pretty tough, right? And you are going to be going into the maps with your mapping build, so you can't really swap character onto a bossing character unless you just call in a friend or something like that, right? So yeah, you're going to have a character that both is decent at doing the in-map ultimatums as well as the boss. It's a mapper mechanic. That's what it is. These nodes, again, pretty conditional. I probably won't take them because I think the keystone is too good. That's what I'll do. This keystone I think is really good, Ruinous Wager, because it's good for early. Essentially it risks you losing your ultimatums to ruin rather than dying, because the monsters are going to deal 50% less damage to you. So it becomes more about like, oh, let me dodge around, right? And this is pretty good on builds that have like higher damage, or builds in general that wouldn't be able to complete an ultimatum otherwise, as well as potentially block or evasion builds, as I think you can dodge and evade and block ruin in most situations. However, that might have been quoted differently, or I might be misremembering. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, potential for that. And this one is really cool because you get to tailor how you play ultimatum. So as we talked about at the beginning of the video, there are 4 different types of ultimatum. There's going to be stand in the circle, kill monsters, outlast, as well as defend the altar, right? Stand in the circles as well as outlast is going to be better for builds that don't have very high damage but are tanky, as well as whereas defend the altar and kill monsters is going to be for more high damage fast builds. Yeah, depending on which build you are, you will be choosing kill monsters because it's just faster than all the other ones. Honestly, like it's 3 times as fast. At least it was in Ultimatum League. You would be in and out of a map so much faster if you just picked the, kill waves of monsters instead. Assuming that these are all 25% chance each, it being buffed by 100% means it's going to be like a 50% chance to get the ultimatum type that you want, which is pretty reasonable. And I'm really happy to see that for sure, because my main gripe about ultimatum was that anytime I would get stand in the circles, I would probably skip it as it wasn't really worth it in Ultimatum League. But now you have opportunity cost, of course, because you're going to be investing in scarabs as well if you want to target farm it. So that means that like you won't be skipping any of them, right? So you'll just feel kind of bad when you don't get the good ones, but you'll be getting the good one more often, which is really nice. So thank you for that. I'm excited about that for sure. And 2 more notes here, which are really damn cool, coolest notables for sure. And that's the Gamba notables. So the downsides are going to give you more rewards. So high downsides, bigger rewards, which it's pretty much the theme of Ultimatum. So yeah, stand your ground is Ultimatum encounters in your maps get 3% reduced radius each round, so the circle will get smaller, 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 and smaller. Mind you, the circle is pretty big, so you'll have a decent amount of room, but if you are doing 13 waves, you know, it's gonna get pretty small in there. 39% less radius is pretty substantial. Yeah. But the upside of it is that you're going to be getting rewards as though you've completed an additional round, which, you know, it means that when you get to round 13, it's as if you've done round 14. And yeah, that's pretty good also for the earlier rounds. You just be able to ramp up quicker, as the earlier rewards are pretty bad. And the next one, prove yourself worthy, is Ultimatum modifiers in your map starts at a tier higher if possible. So that means that if you have, you know, like the Choking Miasma one, it's going to start at tier 2. This is the downside. You do not like that. It's going to be pretty bad for some cases. And these go up to tier 4. So they ramp up pretty damn quick. Yeah. And the upside of it is that Ultimatum rewards in your map have a 25% chance to be duplicated, which is insane because you have 13 rewards and all of them roll 25% chance to be duplicated. So that means that if you do 10 waves, you know, 2.5 of your rewards are going to be duplicated. And you're just going to be kind of hoping that it's going to be the rewards more in the later half of the Ultimatum rather than the first half. So imagine you get like, I don't know, 3 divines or 100%. I'm telling you, this league, there's going to be Reddit posts of people, which I don't know where they are. They don't exist, but they're not me. It's never me. Going to be people duplicating Magebloods, Headhunters, and mirror inscribed ultimatums. It's going to happen. I'm telling you. Hopefully it's me this time. Please, sir. Yeah, I really like these notables. So yeah, extra gamble, more risk, more reward. Really cool. Thanks, GGG. And yeah, here we talk about the spawn chance. So the spawn chance is important if you want to farm it. You can get up to 40% additional, 45% additional spawn chance. That is 52% if you also have stream of consciousness. So that's pretty nice. And I think 57%, 57 if you also include the base chance. So that's pretty cool. And that can scale up to 75% chance if you block everything and have stream of consciousness as well. That's pretty high investment in terms of passive skills. So if you want to go the route of scarabs, you can, because they are turning metamorph scarabs into ultimatum scarabs. And then on top of them, guaranteeing ultimatum to show up, they're also giving you rewards as though you've completed additional rounds. And I would imagine that, you know, for example, on the normal one, you have +1. This will be, actually, this is probably just Spawn's ultimatum. This will be +1, this will be +2, and maybe this is +4, right? As usually scarabs trend in that you get double as many from winged scarabs. It could be pretty interesting to see whether it's actually worth to do winged scarabs, and you know, maybe I see myself farming them at some point this league to see whether it's worth doing. And then on top of that, you have on the map device for 10 chaos chance to guarantee spawn ultimatum. So yeah, depending on what you're doing, it might be worth it or not, but it's not going to be worth it for people that juice maps, as ultimatums themselves won't be dropping loot, right? So this will be just a specific mechanic for people that want to farm the mechanic and not farm monsters. So for juicers and magic finders, they'll stick to strong boxes and keep the ultimatum scarab cheap, basically. Well, not cheap, but like cheaper because of the demand being specific to only people that want to farm ultimatum. And that is it. That is actually it. There was a lot to talk about. Ultimatum is a pretty it's actually a simple mechanic, honestly, guys. It's really fun. You just go in there, you go carrot and stick approach. You just see the divine orb, you click it, and you're like, yo, and you fail and you're sad. But if you don't fail, you're happy, right? So yeah, go out there and enjoy Ultimatum. It's gonna be great. It's a really good addition to the base game. I am really happy that it's back, and I'm really looking forward to, you know, making some maybe strategy around it, but mostly just figuring out how much currency you can get out of it in general and how much cool stuff I'll be able to find in the league. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. It's a long one again, I'm sorry, but thank you, boys. Have a good night, everybody. Hope to see you guys again soon. Peace out. Sheesh, my throat.